Hey there, kings and queens. Welcome back to another episode of Faith Helps Podcast. And I'm your host, Dr. Diamond A. Booth. And somebody asked me, what does the A stand for? It stands for Alexis. So my middle name is Alexis. So it's Diamond Alexis Booth. And I just like that my initials is Deb. I'm so childish. That's probably why people think I'm younger than I am, is because I act like a child, but it keeps me youthful or whatever. I just need these little boys to stop trying to talk to me. Y'all understand? Anywho, listen. I've been loving the comments. Please keep commenting. I read and respond to every comment, unless it's inappropriate or foolishness, or y'all trying to bait me into a debate. That's not going to be fruitful. But those of you who have been sending in questions or sending in parts that stood out to you or didn't sound clear, I appreciate that, because what I don't want you to do is leave this podcast confused. I don't want you to leave this podcast feeling more distraught or overwhelmed or feeling like, oh man, this life is impossible or whatever. And I love the questions that you guys sent me from the previous episode, which we're actually picking up on today. So if you listen to last week's episode, we talked about slothfulness versus burnout and how can you tell the difference. And at the end of last week's episode, I talked a little bit more about high capacity people. And some people were asking me, what do you mean by high capacity person? So I wanted to pick up there, and it seemed to merge so beautifully. I was praying over how to present the information today. And God pricked me in my heart about something that he's been showing me since the beginning of this year, which actually started towards the end of December, but it's been a theme going out this year. I don't care what church I go to. I don't care what sermon I listen to. I don't care what podcast I listen to. Even when it comes to my friends, the theme of David after being anointed and having to run from Saul, like that, just before he's about to go into his positioning as king, has continuously come up. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, as it relates to high capacity people. So if you are someone who is a high capacity person, here's what I mean, because it's not simply just you're doing a lot. You're doing a lot, but you're also doing it at a high level of intensity, a high level of effort. Because slothful people can also do a lot of things, but they're not doing it with their best effort. They're not doing it with full focus and attention. They're not doing it out of their heart. Someone who is high capacity, you are driven, you are determined. There is a level of excellency that you care about in getting things done. So what does a high capacity person sound like? A high capacity person sounds like, it's better if I just do it myself. I sleep when I'm dead. I hear a lot of people say, oh, I'll rest when I'm dead. I hear a lot of people saying it's impossible to get 8 hours of sleep. It's impossible to get 6 hours of sleep. Oh, I pull all-nighters every single day. Oh, I have to hustle. I got to grind and get in it. You hear a lot of people who are high capacity, they say things like, it's not going to get done right if I don't do it myself. Oftentimes, high capacity people, until they learn how to steward their capacity a little bit better and their ability to delegate better, they often struggle with delegation until they learn how to do it. So a high capacity person, they typically got their hands on a lot of different things when it comes to their business or their organization, or even at their job. Even if they're working for someone else, they tend to have their hands on a lot of things. They're helping Miss Susan with this. They're helping John with that. They're helping Big Booty Judy with this. They doing all types of stuff, right? They just all over the place. And they still get their own task done. They're usually the last one to leave and the first one in. They're usually the person who devotes all of their time and effort to making sure things are perfect. And they often struggle with perfectionism to a fault, to the point where they can't get things done, or they take way longer than necessary to get things done because they're trying to make it perfect. They're trying to do it with excellency. None of that, as far as excellency, is bad. It's a good thing that someone who is high capacity is trying to make sure that they are doing things with excellency, because that's what God calls us to do. It's a good thing that they don't want to just put out anything, and that they don't want to half butt it, so to speak. y'all know what I'm trying to say. Look, Lord's still working on me in these replacement for curse words. But that is what a high capacity person sounds like. And the other thing that I'm noticing, especially in our current culture, is this hustle culture. And I find that a lot of people who are high capacity gravitate to this hustle culture. And you got to be careful of that, because a lot of times that's rooted in pride. You see, pride thrives off of this ego. It thrives off of self-ambition and self-strength and self-wisdom. It thrives on knowing a lot and being able to do a lot. It's like, oh, I got this. Oh, I stayed up. I was grinding. Now, don't get me wrong. Allow yourself to accept the flowers when they're due, right? Yes, you have been working hard. Yes, you have been kicking butt. Yes, you have been doing over and beyond. But number one, at what cost? And two, are you doing it so that you get the glory or so that God gets the glory? Because at the end of the day, everything we do, everything about us is supposed to point people back to God. But if you're pointing people back to yourself, like, yeah, I did this, I did that, I, the center of pride is I. Be careful of that. Pride. Center is pride. So is I. So if it's I, where are people learning about God? Where are people being drawn back to God? Where are people saying, oh, she didn't just do this in her own strength. She did this in the strength of the Lord. So I want you to be careful about that. And this is not to strip you of your identity as a high capacity person. This episode is not to break you down and say that you're wrong or condemn you or convict you at all. But what this is to say is to teach you how to have balance. It's important to know how to balance being a high capacity person, but not so much so that you're killing yourself and you're stripping all the glory away from God and harboring it to yourself because you're so proud of everything you've achieved on your own. Because nothing really have you accomplished on your own. God gave you the ability to do every single thing that you have accomplished. He was strengthening you. Even if you don't believe in God, baby, He is still with you because He loves you that much. He will still be with you and is waiting for you to turn and to seek Him out, to make Him your source. Because if He's not your source, you go by the default. If God's not the source, the enemy is the source. The devil is your source. If God is not your source of strength, the devil is. Because the devil will strengthen you to kill yourself. He will strengthen you to do things that are going to burn you out. That's why I was talking about burnout last week. The devil will give you the ambition to stay up every single night, all day long, not eat, not drink, not sleep, nothing, because ultimately his goal is to kill you, to destroy you, to steal from you. You're not functioning at your best capacity if you are burnt out to the point of you are no longer viable to the kingdom of God. So if you are someone who is very high capacity, very ambitious, that's wonderful. But you need to have balance and you need to have wisdom. And part of that wisdom comes from knowing, okay, in order for me to be wise in this and to have balance, I need a strategy. What is your strategy? Because let me tell you this right now, staying up every single day of your life, every week, every weekend, not honoring the Sabbath, continuing to burn yourself out and gleaming in that is going to kill you. Your organs cannot handle that. You eventually are going to burn out or end up in the hospital. I say this with so much love because I'm tired of seeing people that I know have so much potential who are so amazing, and they are great hard workers. Many of them you know, and you follow them on Instagram, on social media, and they are in the hospital because they did not learn yet the balance between slowing down. I really love the book. There's two books I want you guys to read. The first book is Outwitting the Devil. I love it because it shows exactly how the devil uses things like exhaustion and sleep deprivation and burnout, along with other things, against us. So that we think that, oh, this is a good thing. Look how hard I'm working, God. And God is like, You haven't taken a Sabbath in 75 years. What are we talking about? God created the Sabbath as a gift to you, and he took it very seriously. He was killing people over not honoring the Sabbath. He was very serious about it. So you need to take it serious. It's a gift. It's something freely given. And then secondly, the next book I would want you to read is The Higher You Climb by Jonathan McReynolds. So in that book, I just finished it a little while ago. In that book, he also talks about what he notices is as people are climbing. And I want you to think about some of the people who are very well known and who are of high estate, celebrities who are, grand and very big. And they're high up there and they have all the lights, cameras all on them, right? And they've achieved so much. They have so many awards. They got awards out the woohoo, baby. They are up there. They have climbed that mountain. But at what cost? And it goes on to talk about the cost that it happens to your character, to your faith, and to your relationship with God. Because at a point, you so focus on climbing that you neglect the relationships that keep you grounded. And he talks about the benefits of being in the valley and not neglecting the valley season, coming down to earth, so to speak, to reconnect with God, reconnect with people. Because through people, through connection with people, God created us for connection. We are allowed to be back, to be reminded of our humanity, but also reminded of our dependency on God. And that's what I want you to talk about, what I want to talk about with you guys. That question of what is your strategy? My recommendation is to encourage and strengthen yourself in the Lord. In the Lord, not in yourself, but in the Lord. Now, I pulled that from 1 Samuel chapter 30, verse 6. So 1 Samuel chapter 30, verse 6, we are looking at David, and David is the baby going through it, okay? Now, before I read the verse, give you context of what's happening here. David has been anointed king. He was anointed king, and Saul is currently king, and Saul is trying to kill him. Okay, he was playing the lyre to soothe Saul from being tormented by these evil spirits, but Saul has had it. Saul realizes that David is supposed to surpass him and become king, and Saul is not trying to have it. He's trying to kill him. All while that is happening, David is on the run because Saul done thrown arrows at him. David is trying to survive. And so remember what we talked about last week about what is the state of that person in survival mode. Okay, he's anointed king, so I know who I am. I know God called me for more, but it don't look like what I see right now. I'm being threatened. Now, fast forward to chapter 30. He has a group of soldiers, a group of men who have joined him, have come on his side, and they have partnered with David. They believe in him, but they have just suffered a great loss because they came and took David and his people's wives and their children. And so all of David's men that were with him are now turning on him. And just before we get to verse 6, they have just threatened David and said that we are going to, we should stone him to death. Killing him. So let's look at verse 6. So it says, and David was greatly distressed, for the people spake of stoning him, because the soul of all the people was grieved. Their wives and their children were just taken. Of course they're grieved. Of course they are distraught. Of course they would be angry. Put yourself in their shoes. This person that you're looking to as a leader who said that he was anointed king, he's supposed to be king, he has just led us into a situation where we don't see God. What we're believing for does not look like God's promise. We are afraid for our lives and the lives of the ones we love. So picking back up, the people was grieved, every man for his sons and for his daughters. But David encouraged himself in the Lord, his God. Now, some translations say he strengthened himself. I'm going to use both, strengthened and encouraged himself in the Lord. It doesn't necessarily tell you how he strengthened himself or encouraged himself in the Lord. It doesn't go into detail and say, oh, he did this and that. And I think that God purposefully allowed that part to not be included in the scripture. Because what happens when we see a blueprint for something, we start thinking we got to follow that blueprint exactly. And we start trusting more in the blueprint than we trust in God. Let me say that again. When you get a blueprint, we often, just as humans, when you get a set of instructions, you tend to follow what those say and trust more in those than you trust in God. You start to seek out what it's saying more than you seek out what God is saying in the present moment. I believe that the how David strengthened himself was left out so that you would think about, how are you to strengthen yourself in the Lord? How are you supposed to be encouraging yourself in the Lord? And you can find that out by looking at your relationship with God. You see, each of us have a unique one-on-one relationship with God. With some of us, God is a lot more stern. He don't play. And he may be putting more on you compared to the people that you look around. You looking around at everybody else like, I don't see nobody else going through all these challenges. I don't see nobody else going through all these burdens. Why is it all on me? And God is like, I have you at a higher standard. I have you at a higher requirement. And as you're looking at that, I want you to think about, okay, if God is holding me to a higher requirement and a higher standard, why might that be? What is it in my relationship with him that he's been trying to reveal? So one of the things that I want to say is you also get out of your relationship with God what you put in. Okay. And so that's another reason why all of our relationships with God can look different. So for some of us, our relationship with God may look a lot more stern than someone else. For some of us, our relationship with God may look a lot more gentle and compassionate. And we're like the weeping prophets, right? And for some of us, our relationship with God may look like we talk with God 24/7 a day. Like we are just constantly talking with God. For some of us, we are like very strategic. Okay, God, what do you want me to do now? How are we doing this? Let's do this. Let's do that. Think about it in the sense of your relationships with the people in your lives. The way you interact with your wife or your husband is not the same way you interact with your children. The way you interact with your wife or your husband is not the same way you interact with your boss. It better not be. Listen. The way that you interact with your boss is not the same way that you interact with your friends. The way that you interact with your spouse is not the same way that you interact with the people that you just work out with or your club members. It's a different relationship with each of them. And you may have the same amount of love for each of these people. You may still care about their well-being and all of that, but the relationship, the dynamics, the way you talk with them is very different. For my black and brown folk, we know that we tend to code switch depending on the environment we're in. The way I know for a fact that the way I talk on camera is a lot more similar to the way I tend to talk with my in a more formal white collar space, so to speak. And it's very different from how I talk with my friends. Now, I've grown to kind of merge a little bit more of my own identity and get rid of some of that code switching when I am on camera because I want to be authentic. And depending on what the topic is, and I start getting real enthusiastic, you'll see it come out. Like, especially when I'm like making jokes and I'm starting to talk about my own stories and stuff, I just start talking. But when I kind of come back and I'm like, okay, this is what we're talking about, I get a little bit more serious and that code switch just happens. Same thing with God. There's a difference that happens when I come to God. And it's also a difference that happens when you come to God depending on the stage that you're in. When you are thriving and you are living your best life, you come to God differently from when you are in a season of weeping and grief and stress and overwhelm, like we just read for David. So think about, number one, what does your relationship with God look like? What has it looked like in the past? Number two, what are you putting into your relationship with God? And if you don't know where to start and trying to figure all this out and you're like, I don't really know, think about your memories. Look back on your memories. You see, one of the things I loved in the Bible is that they always created a monument or named the place that they encountered God in a certain way. So, for example, Abraham, Jehovah Jireh, he coined that because God provided the ram when he was about to kill his son. God provided an alternative sacrifice. So he named it Jehovah Jireh. It's recognizing this is where God showed up in this way. Moses on top of the hill, Jehovah Nissi the banner, because they got the victory over the Amalekites. We also see Jacob in the battlefield, the hill country. He named Bethel house of God, because that's where he had the ladder dream of the angels ascending and descending up the ladder. They named these places not just to name it, but to remember, and for the people to come after them to remember. So when you are going through your memory bank of things that God brought you through, start off small. It can be something like the fact that you woke up this morning. There are a lot of people that didn't wake up this morning. Look at the news. That is a great way to start seeing how God is showing up in your life. When you see that all the stuff that's happening in the news and it didn't happen to you, you could have easily been switched places with them. But no, you're here. Maybe that trauma that you went through, you may have been looking at it as just a sense of this happened to me. This is horrible. But where was God's grace and mercy and protection still in there? I've done that even with my own trauma. I sit and I see God's fingerprint, God's hand over my life, even when everything else was around saying, no, this should end in death. No, this should end in insanity. No, this should end in inability to function at all. Yet God kept me. I think that is the thing that we have to get better at when it comes to overcoming hardships in our life, is to shift the perspective. And this is not to be insensitive. This is to be wise and strategic. Use the superpower you have. You have an amazing mind perspective is a powerful tool. That is a superpower. And if you have that ability of perspective shifting, to look at something instead of calling it a burden and start looking at it as a blessing, start looking at it as an opportunity, start looking at it as a way that God showed up for you, you will find that you are unbreakable. You are able to overcome anything. And more importantly, you start to develop trust in God. You start to understand God on a whole new level, because you start to see his fingerprint in your hand, in your life, right? So that is what I would first tell you to do, is to start off with your memories with God. If you, let's say, maybe you're like, I still can't think of nothing. I want you to do this. Read the Bible. Get this thing. Get yourself one of these. And when you read your Bible, read it from the perspective of this is history. Read it like a history book that you had to study in school. Instead of reading it like just a religious book of stories, read it as a history book, because that's what it really is. Not everybody accepts it as one, but that's what it really is. These characters in the Bible are not just characters. They're people that lived long before us, that they went through battles that we can often see ourselves in. Just as I've shared, right now I'm in a season where I'm seeing myself in David in a lot of ways. I'm seeing myself in David's story, his trials, his tribulations, and his victories in a lot of ways. Look at the Bible as not just a fictional fantasy book. It is truth. It is actual truth, and it's history. And when you read it from that perspective, you start to have a new level of faith. Just like when you can read the I Have a Dream speech from Martin Luther King, you start to get a sense of courage, a sense of hope, a sense of duty and responsibility. The same thing happens when you look and shift your perspective and look at this Bible as truth, the truth that it is, the history that it actually is, instead of just some storybook. And then I want you to think about, like, okay, in addition to looking at these characters, what are the people, because I want to get out of saying characters, who are the people in the Bible that most closely represent how I feel in my life right now? And do a Bible study on them. Just really deep dive into them. And don't just read their one chapter or their one section in the Bible they are. Look up, you got Bible Chat GPT now. Look up every single time that person's mentioned. Because a lot of times you can read about someone's story, you can read about Moses throughout Exodus, but then and Leviticus, but then later on in the New Testament, you also read about how Moses is remembered, how he's brought back up, how they talk about his faith. That is why you can't just read one part of the Bible and be like, oh, okay, I'm done. Look at the full context. Do research. Treat it as an actual history book and start studying, okay? So why is it important to remember this? It's important to remember this because, yes, I said, and I am believing as for me and my house. So, I don't know about your house, but as for me and my house, the Lord 2 years ago told me that 2026 is the season of thrive. That was the word for me. 2026 thrive, 2025 show up, and 2024 emerge. And 2024 was a heck of a season. But show up, which is last year, a couple weeks ago, show up bridges the gap between emerge and thriving. And I think that's significant because even as we look at David, he is kind of in this merge between showing up and going into his promise, the thriving season. He's right there, but he ain't in it yet. He's like going into it. And it's a hard place to be in when you're becoming what you're about to be. Because you're not quite what you were. You're not emerging anymore. And you're kind of done with showing up, but you still got to maintain showing up because you're about to thrive. And you're not fully thriving, but you feel like you're starting to begin to thrive, right? That's where David is. And that's where many of us are. In this season, and I'll use myself as an example, I'm realizing showing up didn't end when 2026 started. Because as you thrive, you still have to show up. You still have to maintain. Help me maintain. Help me maintain. You still have to maintain. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Rick Warren. He's an author. He was a pastor. Amazing person. Amazing works that he wrote and produced. But one of the things he says is that a lot of us are in a season of battle and blessing. We're living in a world of duality, right? He used this analogy of train tracks. So if you look at sets of train tracks, one is going this way, one's going that way, but they're parallel to each other, right? One in your life is battle. One in your life is blessing. What does this look like in reality? It looks like you just had a baby, but you also just lost a relative. Or switch the sides. The battle is you just lost a relative, and the blessing train track over here is you just had a baby. So you're holding grief and joy at the same time, right? Or it can look like, okay, your battle is that you just left out of your job. You just resigned, telling myself. And the blessing is that you just started a business and you successfully got it launching. But you're not quite there yet because you just left the job. So that took away a source of income, but you're also becoming and celebrating this huge accomplishment. Battle and blessing. What battles and blessings are you facing right now? Maybe your battle is that you don't feel like anything's changed, but you're in a new year. Maybe that's all you feel like is different. You don't feel like nothing in your life has changed. You at that same job that you don't want to be at. You still having the troubles in your marriage. But the blessing is that you're still here. Maybe it's that basic. You're still here. Maybe the blessing is I was able to not get fired when they laid off everyone else. They chose to keep me. What is the battle and blessing happening in your life? Maybe you just lost a huge percentage of your income. One of your businesses failed, but at the same time, your book just won New York Times bestseller. This huge loss, but also this huge blessing. Battle and blessing, battle and blessing, battle and blessing. We're constantly in this life of battle and blessing. And you need to master balance in order to survive that in between, especially as a high capacity person. Because for a high capacity person, you can start looking at everything as failure and start ridiculing yourself and start beating yourself up because you forget to look at the blessing that's happening. Because high capacity people who tend to be perfectionists, who tend to want to get everything done right, who tend to want to control the outcome, who tend to want to be excellent in all things. If you have a battle happening right now, maybe all you need to do in some areas is maintain, not escalate, not elevate, not seek higher. Maybe you just need to learn how to maintain right now. Maybe as you're developing your book that you just wrote, you're also learning how to maintain a steady schedule. You're continuing to show up for those meetings. Maybe you aren't bringing the donuts that you were bringing to every single meeting. Maybe you're just showing up to the meetings and you're smiling and you're being present and you're still trying to be a light and allowing God to strengthen you, just as David did. And continuing to stay the course of who God has called you to be. Battle and blessing. You see, when David encouraged himself in God, it doesn't tell us how, but I think when we look at David's life, we can extract some pieces from how and make some assumptions of how he likely did it. We know David as a dancer and a singer. We know him using music. We know he was a worshiper. That gives us some hints of how we strengthen ourselves in the Lord. Strengthening yourself in the Lord might look like you singing a praise and worship song from your heart. Like there are many times, actually most times when I'm singing worship songs, I change the lyrics and input what I'm actually going through. I might be singing their chorus, but I'm adding in stuff that I'm living right now so that it's not just a song that I'm repeating. It's my testimony that I'm proclaiming. It's the breakthrough that I'm praying for. It becomes a prayer. It becomes a surrender. You see, number one is knowing how to worship God and trust in God even when you are dealing with that battle. And trusting Him is also looking at the blessing that's happening in your life. It's reminding yourself of what God has done for you. Not allowing yourself to become lost in the challenges. David could have easily given up when they said they wanted to stone him. He could have easily said, God, you made a mistake anointing me. Why did you even anoint me if I was going to go through all this for so long? I got Saul trying to kill me. I'm ducking and dodging. Like, what the heck? And he could have stayed there, but he encouraged himself in the Lord. He sought God. He asked them to go get his ephod. And he prayed and asked God, will I have victory? Should I pursue these people? And God said, yes, you will have victory. Pursue them. And so he didn't get bogged up in the emotion of the battle that was happening. He didn't get bogged up and emotional with all the other men about just the loss. He grieved, he wept, but he also said, all right, God, let me go back to my strategy. I know, and because in order for him to even think to go to God in prayer and to strengthen and encourage himself in the Lord, he had to remember why to go to God. Because someone who has never had that type of experience with God, your first thought isn't going to be to go to God. Your first thought might be to get a bottle of liquor and drown out your worries. Your first thought might be to curse people out. Your first thought might be to go to even your therapist. Even as a therapist, I encourage my clients First and foremost, have you talked to God about this before you brought it to me? What has God said? Because what I'm not going to do, baby, is go against what God has told you. And I trust more what God is speaking to you than what he may be telling, what you may be thinking you want me to tell you. Let me make that make sense, because I feel like I said that kind of complex. You have your own relationship with God. Even though I'm a psychologist, even though I'm this professional and I have my own relationship with God, I'm still going to be cautious that when God is telling me something, I say only what he says and not bring in my own stuff. Because I can also bring in my own testimony with God and tell you something and give you advice on something, but that ain't what God's telling you to do. Which is why I don't think it tells us how David is strengthened and encouraged himself in the Lord. It's because it's for you to seek out for yourself how to do that with God. Now, you may have options and ideas, and you can extrapolate from scripture how David did that. But at the end of the day, you need to go to God for yourself. You need to develop a relationship with him. You need to develop a memory bank of what God has done in your life. For my beautiful lovies who are new to Christ, and maybe you are like, girl, you talking about all these scriptures and stuff, and I don't even know nothing. Let me tell you this: slow down, breathe, don't become overwhelmed. Okay, that's what I would say first. Secondly, make it simple. I know that we as Christians, sometimes we make it so complicated to have a relationship with God. We make it sound so complicated to be a Christian. And it was never supposed to be this complicated. It was never supposed to be more of a burden than it is a blessing. So my encouragement to you is to think about how you treat your real relationships when you're thinking about your relationship with God. Your healthy relationships, not your toxic relationships, not your broken relationships. Because sometimes we tend to take our broken, toxic relationship patterns into a relationship with God. And God is like, because he has standards. We talked about his standards. He has standards. You can't approach me any type of way. You can't just be doing any type of thing and expect me to, I want to take that back, because I was about to say expect me to still show up, because God will still show up, because he does give grace and mercy. And he also knows where you are in your growth and relationship with him. But he is going to tell you there is a certain level of honor and reverence to have when coming to me, right? When being in my presence, right? And so remembering that, and then looking back on how God has shown up for you, and reading these biblical stories is not just the story, and pursuing God, seeking him out in a relationship, making time for him. These are things that can help nurture you and help you to learn what it looks like for you to strengthen yourself and encourage yourself in the Lord. Because as a high capacity person, someone who is so high capacity, someone who's so ambitious and doing all the things, if you are not diligent and seeking God out and making him your cornerstone, making him the center of everything that you do and everything that you pursue, you're going to die in burnout. You're not going to make it into the season of thriving. You're not going to make that transition. You're not going to survive this transition between showing up and thriving, because it is a transition and both are happening simultaneously. Showing up for me last year, there were a lot of battles that I had to keep showing up for. Showing up for me meant continuing to be there even when I didn't feel like it. Continuing to show up and do my best and to give effort even when I hated what I was doing and I didn't believe in it anymore. But God told me to steward it, to be respectful, to honor it, to do my best anyway. Even though I couldn't wait to get out of certain places and circumstances, he told me, continue to serve with love. Continue to serve with compassion. Don't dishonor me here, because you still represent me. Even if this isn't where I'm leaving you, you still represent me while you're here. So whatever season you're coming out of, whatever breakthrough you're coming out of, whatever battle you're coming out of, but you're not quite yet in the aftermath of it, you're not quite yet in the victory, you're not quite yet in the thriving, Maintain that relationship with God, allowing Him to strengthen and encourage you. Maintain it. And continuing to build and celebrate and thrive and encourage yourself and just be happy about the blessings that are happening. Because the blessings aren't just what you're envisioning, it's what's happening today. It's the fact that you have clothes on your back, food on your table, you are able to get transportation, that you woke up, you got activity of your limbs. Those are all things to allow yourself to celebrate and to give thanks for. Those are the blessings, not just the big thing that you're believing for. It's the little things that are happening, the things that are happening in the mundane. Those are the blessings while you're still going through your battle, while you're still coming out, while you are still transitioning. You can survive this transition. God is with you in this transition. And I hope that this encourages you. I hope that this reminds you that God is not a God that He will lie. His promises are true. His promises are real. These biblical narratives, these biblical truths, these biblical people that we read about, it's all truth. And they all show a part of our own stories if we look hard enough, if we read deeply enough, if we actually choose to believe instead of just reading it, but reading with belief. Allow your Bible to be the thing that points you to truth when you are in those seasons of discouragement, when you are in those seasons of losing faith. Okay? Now, the last thing that I wanted to say is, as someone who is learning how to create more balance, not letting go of your ambition, not letting go of the blessings you're believing for and the big things that you're trying to do, while also still enduring the battle and enduring the tests and trials, but not getting burnt out by them. It's going to require you to learn how to master trust and fear, right? So what I mean by that is, a lot of times we want to get rid of fear and we just want to focus on trust. And my encouragement to you is not to try to get rid of one or the other, right? My encouragement to you is to do both. You can trust God and be real about the fears that you have. God is not going to chastise you for that, because trust and fear looks like stepping off the boat and walking towards God. But there is still that natural fear of sinking. Otherwise, it wouldn't have happened, right? Trust and fear, to make it more practical to your life, trust and fear looks like going bungee jumping. And you're trying to trust that that bungee is not going to snap while you jump. But if we're being realistic, it is a possibility. There is still that fear there, but you're trying to have faith that this bungee will hold, that God will allow and protect me as I jump to make it back safely back up, right? You say, oh, I would never bungee jump. Okay, let's bring it down a notch. An airplane. Every time you've gotten on an airplane, you out in Tulum, you out in Cozumel or Japan or Asia, wherever you've traveled, New York, I don't care, it's been in the States. Every time you got on that plane, and we saw last year what's been happening with these planes, you had trust and there was some fear. At its very core, if you don't think it was fear, let that plane go a little, ooh, whoa, hold up. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Y'all start praying in tongues and everything. Lord God, you will pray that plane into submission of the Lord with just a little bit of turbulence. Let that thing go, ooh, and you are out of there. You are, oh my gosh, Lord. Fear is there, but you're also trusting. The decision to get on that plane is, you're trusting that it's going to get there. But the fear is that, the possibility that it actually, if we just be realistic, it could go down, right? You saying, well, I don't get on planes. I got you. You drive anywhere or let people drive you. You're trusting that you're going to be able to get there safely. A lot of us, we do this without even second thought. And accidents happen every single day, every hour across the country. There are car accidents happening, and some that are very detrimental, and people have died, right? And yet you wake up at 6 a.m., you get your coffee, you get in that car, you drive to work the same route that you do every single day, just trusting that you would get there. But there's a possibility that you could get into an accident. There could be a drunk driver on the road. There could be a random animal running across the street that make you swerve into another car. You have to learn how to hold the tension of both. Just like holding the tension of a battle and a blessing at the same time. What that really is learning how to hold the tension of fear and trust in God. In the battle, you may be afraid. You may be like David and you feel like I'm running for my life and these people want to kill me. And at the same time, you're holding on to the blessing. Just like David, I'm trusting in God because I know who he has been in my life. He's the one that anointed me. He's the one that chose me. So I'm standing on this blessing and I'm holding on it. Hold the tension of both and do not allow yourself to be burnt out with the worries and the concerns and the burdens of life, so much so that you don't know how to rest and relish in the blessings and the good things that God is doing. If you want to survive and learn how to thrive and still show up as your best self, you're going to have to learn how you can still be this high capacity person, but you got to have balance. And that balance comes through strategy of knowing how to hold the tension between a battle and a blessing, fear and trust, and knowing that God is with you, seeking him out for yourself, developing a relationship, an intimate relationship with God for yourself. That's all I got for y'all. That's all I got for y'all. That's all I got for y'all. I hope that this helps you. I hope that this encourages you. I hope that this inspires you in some way. And, oh, remember, faith helps.